Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times best-selling author. Each week, Dr. Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest on a range of compelling topics, from literature to psychology to financial wellness. To learn more about Dr. Crosby's behavioral finance work at Orion, visit www.orion.com.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and today I am joined by husband and wife team, Doug and Heather Boneparth. Doug is a CFP and founder of Bone Fide Wealth. Heather is a lawyer, writer, and advocate at the intersection of money, relationships, and family life. And together, this beautiful team has written Money Together: How to Find Fairness in Your Relationship and Become an Unstoppable Financial Team, a book that explores why money disagreements are rarely about dollars alone. It's a fantastic book comprised of 5 different parts, including beginnings, mistakes, contributions, power, and risk, and they're here to talk about it today. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hey friend.
Hi. That was a great intro. Better than I could have given. What about my own book?
One of the best to do it.
We aim to please. I have been meaning to have you on for a while. I've been moving and my life has been chaos. So I'm glad we finally figured it out. We're going to start with Doug and I talking about why gray is beautiful and comparing volume tips for hair. That's where we're going to begin.
I think we should measure. Like, we need to take out a measuring stick and see.
You know, Dan, your hair, your follicles are the best they've ever looked. And as far as color is concerned, I would actually go all white if I could. And truthfully, this was actually a big help in this industry where, you know, when I started out very young, you know, you would do anything to get like credibility, to show that you were like mature and worldly. And believe it or not, like having some gray hair actually was quite beneficial when you're like 26 trying to convince people that you should manage their finances.
Correct. Well, I am forever second place to you, Doug, and am in awe of your follicles. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about money together. I was one of the worst marriage counselors ever to exist when I was doing marriage counseling. We're going to try not to bring that energy to the table today. I was a much better individual counselor than a marriage counselor. So at the risk of blowing up your marriage, I wanted to begin.
I didn't know you were a marriage counselor.
Yeah. I mean, I was a therapist for a season. I did a bit of marriage counseling. It was tough for me, and here's why. I always had a favorite. Like when the couple would come, I always preferred one person in the relationship. And here, clearly, Heather is.
That would not be me. Yeah.
I mean, clearly, Heather is the favorite.
I beat you to your joke. I saw it coming from a mile away.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair, though, to be honest.
So I want to start, though, with a question about, you know, you did this as a team. Was there anything you learned about each other? Or was there anything you learned about your spouse, your partner here, in the process of writing this book that surprised you? Did you cover new ground, or had it all been vetted at that point?
I think, well, we've known each other a very long time. Doug and I met freshman year of college. So we have worked together in different ways before. But I think this was kind of like, how can we throw some gasoline on that and set it on fire, in terms of like, we knew that we work differently. And there's things about the way that we each work that are good. And there's things about the way that we each work that are not so good. I mean, and you know, I went into this project kind of as this really like career redefining pivot, like and moment for me, like leaving corporate law, joining Bone Fide Wealth, following something that I was incredibly passionate about. And I promised myself that if I was going to work on this book and write this book, that I was going to give it everything I have. Now, everything I have is a very subjective concept, right? Like my idea of what's enough, and we talk about this in the book in a different context, but my idea of what's enough is different than Douglas's in the context of work and how much to work and when to call it quits for the day, when to call it quits for a season, when I've worked hard enough on a project like this. So I think that I think that our main point of conflict in this experience was probably like, what's enough? And me being very, very hard on myself and him in the process. So I and we knew that, but I think for me, I had to kind of recognize like, well, I did tell him that I'd be, swinging for the fences, that I was going to give everything I have, but maybe he's right, that maybe I've entangled a little too much of my like self-worth and current like sense of self in this project.
Yeah, right.
I said you were right for a time.
for a moment.
Yeah, like that was recognizing that he had a fair point, that maybe I needed to kind of like adopt a little bit of his sensibility and larger perspective on keeping this project in perspective.
Yeah, I come at it from it's the same answer, but it's from the opposite side, right? Like my lessons were that despite, having spent at this point 2 decades in the industry, Heather, she'll always say to me like, you don't stop learning. You haven't figured it all out. There's always more you can do. Stop sounding like you know everything. And yes, look, that's a lot of time in, but she's 100% correct that, you got to push yourself. And I've always believed in that. So that's a little bit on me. But for Heather, it's what she said. It's, seeing, now don't take this the wrong way because she knows this. Like, she is a stubborn one. Like, she's an only child of divorce, Leo. And I'm a Scorpio. Like, we're not big astrology people, but we're told like we shouldn't be in the same room with each other. And we're still alive. We haven't murdered each other. So to see Heather kind of come off that rock that she's always been on, and that's what makes her fierce, such a hard worker, so much smarter than me, all these things, much better than me, to see her gravitate a little bit towards the center of where we need to be was actually pretty big.
But the one thing I'll say is this too, like this project served a very different purpose for Douglas than it did for me. And he recognized that. And I will give him all the kudos in the world for like being patient with me as I try and navigate this next phase and chapter in my professional life when he's been established. He has a firm. He is known in his industry. He's built he's built his own success and his own platform and a firm and his name in this industry. And so he recognized that this meant something a little bit different for me than maybe it did with him. And I think that, zooming out, that's really important for any ambitious couple to realize, is that when your spouse is chasing a goal, like to understand truly what it means to them. And it may not be something that you understand. It may not be something that you can embody, even if it's something you're working on together. Like you have to understand their why a little bit. And he really did. And he was very patient with me.
Well, that's one of the things that I love about the book and all of your work together is that the medium is the message. I mean, you are both experts in this field, and you're also doing the work in the trenches and in the messiness of figuring this out and being very transparent about how all of this plays out in your own relationships. Already in this, early in this conversation, we've sort of touched on this idea of the why and the subtext, and that there's often more behind a conversation than what might appear on the surface. And that is a big, I think, message, a golden thread that runs throughout the book, is that conversations about money are never really just about money. So in your research from the book, in your own relationship, what's a disagreement sometime that you found among couples that appears to be, ostensibly it's about money, but really it might be about something much, much deeper?
Oh, the whole first section of the book about beginnings, I think, is where you're going to find the vast majority of the fundamental issues that two people aren't necessarily connecting on or making room to accept that part of them in their lives. And you can pick anyone, and we'll, for this purpose, go with culture. right? So we saw a lot of times how the dynamics of growing up and the influences that were around you, whether it be your own family and your family's culture, really impacted the way you're able to communicate around money. It shows up in the ways that you're allowed to earn money, in the ways that you celebrate in the context of money, who has it, who doesn't.
What about even just the idea of how you perceive wealth, how you choose to display wealth and celebrate wealth once earned? These are all ideas that you learn as a child and that you've embodied from your culture. So like, imagine like you're fighting about something proximate in the present. You're saying like, I can't believe you went out and bought that after you got your bonus. And oh my God, it's so obnoxious.
We're not allowed to show this kind of wealth to our community.
Right. And behind that proximate argument are these cultural differences, are these ideas that are, at odds with one another, where maybe you and your partner haven't sat down and said like, hey, how do we really feel about this in the context of our current relationship? How do we choose to spend our money? How do we choose to display our wealth as a couple?
Asking the question of like, is this thinking that we were so accustomed to for so long serving us well today? Mm-hmm. And it's very uncomfortable to challenge 20 plus years of programming. And you see your grandma and grandpa like frowning at you. You see your parents wagging the finger. And you're trying to escape that. And the truth is, the life you've carved out with the person you love, like none of that really applies to what you're doing.
Well, it might. Or it does. That's the thing. That's what's so hard about figuring it out, is that like so much of this idea of couples work is self-work first. So you've got to turn, the mirror around, look at yourself and say, hey, we seem to be in conflict over this thing, and it's likely because we were raised differently. Yeah. How important is all of this to me? Is it very important to me? Or maybe is this something like we were saying, like we should be stepping off of and charting a new course together that compromises and brings in both of our beliefs? Like this is just like one hot topic idea that comes from this like subtext idea that there's more going on underneath the surface, but comes up all the time. And we saw it in like so many of our conversations.
One of the questions I used a lot as a therapist, it was always tough to deliver it without sounding flippant. But, when someone would be describing a behavior to me, something they were doing, is to say, how is that working for you? Without any presupposition about whether it would it's easy to know, how is that working for you? Like it's, but sometimes it was working. And I think sometimes, like you said, you got to turn that mirror back on ourselves because we're behaving in ways that are unintentional, right? We may have adopted a script or a belief or a narrative, just kind of the way we grew up. And it's like, oh, I can display wealth this way. I can't. The bonus is for this. It's not for that. And you can't make a conscious choice until you dust off that script, examine it, and say, hey, is this working for me? Do I want to choose to live the way that my parents and grandparents lived? Or is this just something I've adopted through osmosis?
Right.
A lot of the conflicts, as you kind of alluded to, aren't with the individual, aren't with the person that you love. They're the conflict within yourself that you have yet to address. And it sets up a whole host of levels of difficulty of doing this type of work. I mean, we're very aware of what we're asking readers to do and people to do. This is some of the hardest work. But in approaching the hardest work and making a valiant effort to improve, you get the biggest reward. So this is a very big swing for people individually and the individual work, and for couples to bring those two things together. That's why we're very proud of it and very excited for it, because if you try and you really stick to it, the rewards are absolutely massive, and we want that for people.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting in my own family. I have a brother I'm the oldest. I have a brother who is 12 years younger than me. And so same parents, same house, all that. When I was born, my mom was working at McDonald's. My dad had recently dropped out of his M.B.A. program and was cutting lawns. Like that's how my parents were making their living. When my brother was born, my dad was a successful financial advisor. And the worlds we grew up in with the same parents in the same house could not have been different, more different. And then the ways that has played out in the careers we've chosen and how we spend our money and how we save our money and how we invest and think about money. For people, we know that this is important, right? To examine these narratives, to examine our beliefs. How do you two suggest that people begin to do that? Because, a fish doesn't know that it's wet. We all grow up sort of swimming in these financial ideas that are not always apparent to us. How do you suggest people practically turn that mirror back on themselves and understand their own beliefs that are often unconscious about money?
I think, it really does start with something as simple as, this sounds so cliche, but it's literally, when I tell you, like, we interviewed dozens and dozens of couples who have never considered their earliest money memories ever, who have never even had a conversation about the first time they remember learning what money is or how it made them feel in that moment. Like, people have not even spoken about that. They have not even put words to that memory and said, hey, like, you just told this story about, that your situation growing up was so different than your brother's. I think people need permission to feel the way that they feel as individuals. And it's not some race to the bottom of who had it worse. So I'll give you this. I always say, your story is your story. It belongs only to you, not your sibling, not your partner, not your parents. It's yours. You need permission to feel the way you feel around whatever happened to you. So, like, somebody else could look at my background and say, well, she's still privileged. Look at her. She grew up in a fancy suburb in New Jersey. Nothing was all that bad. I mean, I'm an only child and grandchild on both sides of my family who, I encountered some adverse childhood experiences at a formative age. And, I experienced a lot of things that made me very afraid of money, very emotional around money. Money was held over my head, and money was used as a form of control. And it really messed me up when I became a young adult. But for a long time, I was so convinced that I wasn't allowed to feel anything that I felt because I was so hyper-focused on becoming successful today in the present that I said, well, you have to let go of all of that in order to move forward. But I was hurting so much inside, and so much of the emotion and the emotional weight that I tied to money was tied to unraveling those stories from my past, and was kind of tied to saying, like, you felt unsafe from an early age because you were made to feel that way, and that wasn't okay. And it really is as simple, truly, I believe, as having and believing that you have permission to unravel those ideas and to feel safe and comfortable enough to share them with the person that you love. There were people, we interviewed someone who experienced very serious housing and food insecurity as a child. And for him to unravel that, I mean, he was so hyper-focused on being so incredibly successful that I don't know if he had fully realized that he was running from the pain and the trauma, so that he didn't allow himself to feel those things, but it didn't serve him in his marriage and in their ability to invest and kind of feel safe where they were today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I know I've said a lot here, but I think it really does just come down to feeling like your story as an individual has value, and not just your story. Let's just say, because this is a relationship book and we're talking about relationships, not just in the context of the relationship between you and your spouse. This isn't a race to the bottom as to who had it worse. If he had a harder childhood, objectively, that doesn't mean your story doesn't matter too.
One thing, thank you for sharing a bit about your story. One of the things that I think that highlights is, on paper, you didn't have, a quote unquote bad money story. Like, you're privileged in many respects. And I think that when people think about a financial script or a money story, they think, well, this is for people at the extremes, like
That's
people, right? People who grew up in backbreaking poverty, or people who were astonishingly rich. And that's not true. Like, you have a money script, you have a money story wherever you fall along that wealth spectrum. And I think one of the first things you could do is realize that you have a story and then try and elucidate that, try and highlight that story, because whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent, it exists. You know, one of my favorite chapters in the whole book, and one that I just found myself saying amen to a lot, and it's very consistent with all my own priors, was this idea that there is no normal. Why is that an empowering message for investors to internalize, that there is no normal?
Yeah, because if there wasn't normal, everybody would be doing the same thing, right? Like, there wouldn't be marketplace, everything about investments, right? There wouldn't be marketplaces of ideas to shop around and test theories, make money, lose money, and all of that stuff here. But when it comes to, individuals and couples, look, it's kind of the spice of life in the relationship. But what you have to remember is, this is two-part work every step of the way. Heather just talked about the self-work that needs to be done to know what your own story is. You need a partner that is able to listen to that. You need a partner that's able to create space in order for them to even share that story with you. And it's with that in mind that, if there was a normal approach to this, everyone would be fixed. We'd have a way to stop working on these things as we continue to go throughout life.
I think it also, embracing the idea that there is no normal, removes this idea of shoulds. We should be doing this. You should be doing this. Why don't you do this differently? Why don't you do this the way I do it? Yeah. Why don't you do it my way? Because that's the way we should be doing it. And one of the main points of this chapter about there being no normal is this idea that we all learn differently. Not only do we all want different things, but we all learn differently. Yeah. Our brains all work differently. So we talk about it in the context of communication. Sometimes you have to meet your partner where they are, even if it's not the way that you would have thought about doing something.
I'll give a quick example of that. It's my favorite example from the book of a couple we've interviewed, a financial professional and his wife, both very eager to dive into working on their finances together. He wanted to bring her up into the household finances. She was very interested in doing that. He would sit down, spreadsheets, numbers, tables in hand, ready to go through it like he would most of his client meetings, only to find himself struggling with his wife, who was also struggling to really get through these meetings. The intention was there. Both were willing to do this, and he was striking out. Until one day he brought a whiteboard into the meeting and started to draw the things that he had put down in these tables and on these spreadsheets. And all of a sudden that clicked. And what he had learned is that his wife was a visual learner, right? That was really the way in which she digested information. And that's kind of what Heather's talking about here, is finding the way in which you operate and your spouse operates so you can figure out how to communicate better and more effectively when it comes to these topics, which, again, back to what I've mentioned before, you're going to dig through some mud here of your past, of your present, and the things that ultimately, are made up of your foundation as a human. It's hard.
And not only is it hard, but I think it requires all of this that we've even spoken about already requires this level of trust to say, I trust that even though I'm stepping away from the way I've always done something in order to step a little bit closer to the way my partner either views things or does things, is still a step that is in the right direction, because it's in the spirit of us carving out something new together. And you have to have trust and a desire to do that. And we hope that through this book, we show that in so many different angles, right? Saying like, there's a million different ways to reach a goal that both of you want. It may not be the one way that you always envisioned it would be, either because that's the way you grew up, or because it's how you learn, or because it's how your brain operates.
How things have changed.
There are so many ways to accomplish something that you both want. It requires that flexibility, fluidity, and trust that you two can respect each other and communicate well enough, and like trust that doing something a little bit uncomfortable is well worth doing.
The therapists have this saying to stop shooting all over yourself, which is catchy and, it's catchy and memorable, of course. But I think anytime you find yourself saying, well, we should or I should be doing this, it's almost always indicative of a belief that you've swallowed without much introspection. Like it's, I should do this. Well, who says I should do this? Because if there is no normal, right, and if you and your partner are, an N of one, if you're unique in the universe, then your situation is unique in the universe, and you may be falling back on these old scripts that may or may not work. Another part of the book that I found really pertinent to my own relationship was the part about contribution. So I'm the breadwinner in my relationship. My wife works very hard at home with the kids. She was homeschooling my son this last year. She was an absolute rock for us during this recent move, doing just an unimaginable amount of legwork. But, she has no W-2. You talk about contribution in the book, which felt very relevant to my context. How do you recommend couples think about value and contribution when one person's contributions may not show up on a paycheck?
We want to widen society's view of what it means to contribute. I think that there's a very traditional yet outdated narrative that we can only contribute by earning money. Like when people say, well, how do you contribute? And someone says, well, I go out and I earn a paycheck. You also contribute in other ways, Daniel. You contribute as a father and as a husband. Those are also ways that you contribute to your family. But I think that we want everyone to view holistically the contributions that spouses are making so that we're not valuing the income-generating contributions as more than the caregiving contributions to a household, because time, energy, care, these are incredibly important concepts when we think about equity in a household and how a household operates in a way that feels fair and frankly filled with love and respect for one another.
Those situations where someone is a working spouse and the other is contributing through financial means, I always like to say, the person who's making the money can't do any of that without the person at home keeping it tight. You're not going to make it anyway. So what are you talking about? When it's that classic, well, I make the money and I should spend my time this way. It's like, dude, that doesn't exist whatsoever without that teamwork.
Right. And so the important lesson from all of this is not just a mental reframe, but it's this idea that our time has equal value. Time spent earning money carries the same value as time spent caring for the people that we love.
Yeah, because
not just our children, but also our parents. I think a lot of us are aging into this sandwich generation. I think it's important to consider parents as well. But just this idea that the time we spend caring for the people we love, that's the time that matters. Time is the greatest currency that we have. And I think a lot of people don't realize that until it's, unfortunately, something makes them realize it.
It's in the subtitle of the book, the word fairness. And what we really want to do is make sure people aren't conflating, equal contribution here with that fairness is equal for everyone here, that it's always a 50-50 by, well, I'm making this much money, you should spend this much time. That's not how any of this really works. And I just want to throw it out there that we spend a little time talking about fairness is what you and your partner have agreed on in terms of your own household. Right? We've met people who, take very classic approaches to how they divide time, whether it's working, taking your kids versus kind of intermingling all of these things, two working spouses, hands-on parents. You're going to go do pickup. I'm going to go do drop-off. However it's done, you ultimately need to find what works for you. And just to back it up for a quick second, it's all of the pressures that are around us, whether it's news, social media, conversations you have with your friends and neighbors that all take a jab at, what you think is the right thing to do. And a lot of times most of the time, if not all the time, it's really what you and your partner define as what is fair for you and your household and your family in order to get through life together. This is your team. Your family is your team to navigate life.
I loved the discussion of fairness in your book because, I come from a family, a faith tradition that puts a lot of emphasis on a quality home life and pouring into kids and that sort of thing. But still, it becomes tricky when, I'm off to an award show somewhere to get a plaque for a thing I did. And, my wife's not getting that for the very sizable, more important work that she's doing at home.
Yeah, I feel it.
Let's talk about this fairness a little bit. What are the myths around fairness? And when recognition is unequal, when pay is unequal, how can couples work to create, felt fairness when the world doesn't always reward all types of work equally?
I always think about fairness. I mean, we talk about fairness as this idea of making room. And that's making room making room in the context of what we spoke about earlier in terms of each other's beliefs and backgrounds and stories and how they feel and their fears about, fears and their concerns and their goals, but also about time. When we talk about making room, we're making room for our spouse to have time to do the things they want to do in life. It is that simple. Yeah. Dr. Corinne Lowe, who does excellent work on this and wrote a book called Having It All, speaks about time as, oh my God, I'm going to get this wrong. And I really wanted to tee up her book because it's excellent, about every partner in a family should be self-actualized in the sense that it's not just time to get done the things on your chore list or time to get done the work that you want to get done. It's time to be the person that you want to be. And I think that is such a great measurement of whether we're reaching this idea of fairness, right? It's not just, did Heather have enough time to make dinner and make it to the grocery store?
Did she get to work out? Did she get to rest?
Yeah.
Did she get to socialize with
whatever
people?
I want it to be? That's the point, right? That is this idea of fairness, right? Like, what can I do as a spouse to be sure that my partner is having the time they need to be self-actualized, whether that is working towards a professional goal, whether that is being the best parent they can be, whether that is reaching a fitness goal that maybe they've set for themselves. It's fluid, but you're never going to be able to do that if you're not talking about it and creating the space in a healthy, stress-free, distraction-free place for you to be kind of like recalibrating that on a regular basis, because you know how dynamic life is running a household and a family of multiple children and how their needs change and our needs change all the time. So like, this isn't a one and done. We said it. Well, I told you at the beginning of the year that you can have whatever time you want. All right. No. We need to be setting aside time to identify what we each need, right? And maybe reconfiguring how we even deploy our funds to help us get that time, because we can't create more time out of thin air. It may be something like at your quarterly money date, which is what we suggest, having a quarterly money date, and maybe we could talk about that too, but we include time in our money dates, and we suggest that couples do as well. We talk about, does each partner feel like they're getting the time they need, whether that's for their work, whether that's for their personal life, whether that's for the kids. And if not, and if your partner can't give that to you, well, guess what? You're in a great position during that money meeting with all your financials in front of you to figure out what funds you can invest in helping you get that time back, whether that's through outsourcing something or hiring somebody to give you a little extra support.
People rather have these money dates or these conversations around money, taking out the budget and seeing how people have spent money and what can be pulled back. And yeah, that's part of the conversation for sure. But they tend to do that because that's a more comfortable conversation, or you can at least point to something instead of the conversation that Heather's talking about, which is everybody getting what they need here? And the results that come out of making sure people get what they need are far greater than, okay, we're going to cut back on the amount of times the babysitter comes so we can go have fun.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because I think when most people think about fairness, it's like bean counting, right? Like
100%.
How many minutes did I watch the kids? How many minutes did you watch the kids? How many dollars did you bring in? When did you do the dishes? When did I do
money on what? Yeah.
Keeping score is never good. Like when you keep score like that, and we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, you spoke for 80% of this. Only
Stop
spoke
it.
for 20. You know.
Guys, thank you for joining me. The book is fantastic. It is necessary, right? We're working on this here at Orion as well. Is one of the leading causes of divorce and separation. If we could get this right, the world would be a better place. Tell us again one more time the name of the book and where folks can find it.
The book is called Money Together. You can find out more at domoneytogether.com. And you can also find us at our weekly newsletter, The Joint Account, which is at readthejointaccount.com.
Doug and Heather, you're doing important work. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.